The board meeting ended exactly as Michael knew it would, with power, with precision, and with him standing at the center of it all. The conference room on the 47th floor of Hartley Industries stretched like a cathedral of glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Manhattan skyline in sharp geometric lines. Michael Hartley stood at the head of the table, 38 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His tie was Windsor knotted, his cufflinks platinum, his watch Swiss and understated in the way only truly expensive things could be. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made grown men lean forward. "The numbers speak for themselves. We've increased quarterly revenue by 18%, expanded into 4 new markets, and our stock price has never been higher." Applause rippled through the room. Michael didn't smile. He never did during business hours. Smiling was inefficient, unnecessary, a waste of facial muscles that could be better used for maintaining the expression that had carried him through Harvard Business School, through his father's sudden death, through 12 years of building an empire his family name barely recognized anymore. He was the youngest CEO in the company's 87-year history. He had earned it through 90-hour work weeks, through sacrificing everything soft and human for something harder and more valuable, success. As the board members filed out, shaking his hand with congratulations that sounded like reverence, Michael gathered his leather portfolio and checked his watch. 7:43 p.m. He had been at the office since 5:30 that morning, as he was every morning, as he would be tomorrow. The elevator descended in silence. Michael stood alone, watching the floor numbers drop like falling dominoes. At the 23rd floor, it stopped. The doors slid open. A woman stepped inside pushing a yellow cleaning cart. She wore a navy blue uniform with the company's janitorial service logo stitched above the pocket. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, wisps escaping around a face lined with years Michael didn't bother counting. She couldn't have been taller than 5 feet 3 inches. Her hands were rough, reddened from chemicals and work. She glanced at Michael, then quickly looked away, positioning her cart in the corner as though trying to make herself and it disappear. Michael said nothing. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails with sharp, efficient swipes. The elevator descended, 18, 17, 16, then it lurched. The lights flickered once, twice. A grinding sound echoed through the shaft, metal against metal, and suddenly they stopped. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in dim amber. "What?" Michael started, but the intercom crackled to life. "Attention, please. We are experiencing a temporary elevator malfunction. Please remain calm. Maintenance has been notified. We estimate repairs will take approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Thank you for your patience." Silence fell like a curtain. Michael stood rigid, jaw clenched. 45 minutes. 45 minutes trapped in an 8 by 8 foot box with a cleaning woman and a cart that smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and industrial soap. He jabbed the emergency call button, once, twice, 3 times. No response. He tried his phone. No signal. "Of course," he muttered, shoving it back into his pocket. The cleaning woman remained perfectly still in her corner, hands folded in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. She hadn't said a word. Michael paced the small space, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. His breathing was controlled, but his mind raced through the evening schedule, now dissolving into chaos. Dinner, meeting with the Singapore investors, missed. Conference call with London, missed. Gym session, dry cleaning pickup, the strategic planning documents he needed to review before tomorrow's acquisition meeting, all of it slipping away with every passing second. "This is unacceptable," he said to no one in particular. The woman said nothing. He glanced at her, irritation flashing. "You'd think a building this expensive would have elevators that actually work." Still nothing. She stood there like a statue, barely breathing. Her silence annoyed him more than words would have. It felt like judgment, like she was witnessing something she had no right to see. Michael Hartley, CEO, powerless and trapped. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The amber emergency lights hummed. The air grew warmer, stuffier. Michael loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves. His perfectly maintained composure began to crack at the edges. "Do you have water?" he asked suddenly. The woman looked up, surprised to be addressed directly. "No, sir." "I'm sorry." Her voice was soft, careful, with an accent he couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe, something that spoke of elsewhere, of before. "Of course not," Michael muttered. She shifted slightly, her hand moving to the cart. "I have—" She hesitated. "I have tea in my thermos. It's just chamomile, but—" "I don't want tea," Michael snapped. She withdrew her hand immediately, returning to her statue-like stillness. Another 5 minutes crawled by. Michael checked his watch obsessively. 7:59, 8:03, 8:07. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, more to fill the suffocating silence than out of genuine interest. 3 months, sir." "You like it?" She paused. "It's work." "That's not an answer." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her eyes, something ancient and knowing, made him uncomfortable. "It's honest work," she said quietly. "That's enough." Michael scoffed. "Honest work, what does that even mean?" "It means I earn what I have. I don't take what isn't mine. I leave places cleaner than I found them." There was no judgment in her voice, no accusation, just simple truth. And somehow that made it worse. "Must be nice," Michael said, his tone sharp with sarcasm, "to have such simple philosophies." "Simple doesn't mean easy," she replied. He turned away, jaw tight. Who was this woman to speak to him about ease, about earning anything? She pushed a cart and emptied trash bins. He ran a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The intercom crackled again. "Update. Maintenance is working on the issue. Estimated time now 55 minutes. We apologize for the inconvenience." 55 minutes, Michael repeated, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. 55 minutes. He kicked the wall, immediately regretting it as pain shot through his foot. Expensive Italian leather, be damned. The woman watched him but said nothing. He spun toward her. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing, sir." "Then stop staring at me." She lowered her gaze immediately. The silence that followed was worse than before, heavier, suffocating. Michael's phone buzzed suddenly. 1 bar of signal, just enough for a text to slip through. His assistant, "Singapore investors requesting reschedule. Call me when possible." He stared at the message, anger rising like bile in his throat. This was unacceptable. All of it. The elevator, the delay, this woman standing there like a living reminder of everything he couldn't control. "You know what your problem is?" he said suddenly, his voice cold and cutting. "People like you. You accept everything. It's just work. It's honest. It's enough. You settle. You don't fight. You don't push. You just exist." The woman's fingers tightened slightly around the handle of her cart, but her voice remained steady. "Maybe existing is harder than you think." "Please," Michael scoffed. "You come in, you clean, you leave. You don't make decisions that affect thousands of people. You don't carry the weight of an entire company on your shoulders. You push a cart." "Yes," she said softly, "I push a cart. And I do it well. And I go home knowing I did something real." "Real?" Michael laughed, bitter and sharp. "This isn't real." "You want to know what's real? Boardrooms at midnight. Decisions that make or break careers. Carrying a legacy you didn't choose but can't abandon. That's real." The woman looked at him with those same ancient eyes. "Sounds lonely." The word hit him like a physical blow. Lonely. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend, to cut her down with the same precision he used in negotiations. But nothing came out, because she was right. The elevator hummed. The minutes crawled. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Michael Hartley stood in silence, not because he chose to, but because he had nothing left to say. 8:32 p.m. The emergency lights cast long shadows. Michael had stopped pacing. He sat now on the floor, back against the wall, tie completely loosened, jacket discarded beside him. The woman remained standing near her cart, patient and still. "My father built this company," Michael said suddenly, surprising himself. He didn't talk about his father, not to anyone, not even to himself if he could help it. But something about the trapped space, the strange intimacy of forced proximity, loosened something in him. He started with nothing, came from a neighborhood where people fought over paychecks and dreamed small because dreaming big only led to disappointment. But he didn't listen. He worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, took risks everyone said were stupid. Michael paused. And he built something that mattered, something that lasted. The woman listened without interrupting. "He died when I was 26. Heart attack. Right there in his office on the 39th floor. The doctor said it was sudden, that he didn't suffer. But I don't believe them. I think he suffered every day. I think the weight of it, the company, the responsibility, the constant fight, it crushed him slowly from the inside." "And yet you carry the same weight," the woman said softly. Michael looked at her. "Because someone has to. But do they? Or do you just believe they do because it's all you've known?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. "What about you?" Michael asked, deflecting. "What's your story? How does someone end up pushing a cart on the 23rd floor of a Manhattan high-rise?" The woman smiled, sad and distant. "Long roads, wrong turns, choices made, and chances lost. That's cryptic. So was your answer about carrying weight." Michael almost smiled. Almost. "I had a different life once," she continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality, as though she were remembering something from very far away. "I had a home. I had people I loved. I thought I had time for everything, but time doesn't wait. It moves whether you're ready or not." "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I made mistakes. I lost things. And eventually, I learned that starting over sometimes means starting from the bottom." Michael studied her, really studied her. The lines around her eyes, the way she held herself, the quiet dignity beneath the uniform. "Do you have family?" he asked. Her expression shifted, something painful flickering across her face before she smoothed it away. "I had a son once." "Had?" "He's still alive, as far as I know. But he's not mine anymore, not in any way that matters." "Why not?" She looked at Michael with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Because I left. And some distances can't be crossed, no matter how much you want to." The words settled between them like stones. Before Michael could respond, the elevator jolted. The lights flickered, then blazed back to full brightness. The normal hum of machinery resumed. They were moving again. Michael stood quickly, brushing off his pants, grabbing his jacket. The doors opened on the ground floor, revealing the marble lobby, the night security guard, the normal world beyond their amber-lit prison. He stepped out without looking back. The woman remained in the elevator with her cart, watching him go. "Sir," she called softly. He paused, half-turned. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Michael frowned, confused. "I already have everything I need." She smiled, sad and knowing. "If that were true, you wouldn't look so lost." The doors closed between them. Michael stood in the lobby, her words echoing in his mind, before he shook them off and walked into the night. It was after midnight when Michael finally reached his penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side. The space was exactly what you'd expect from a CEO's residence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and black, art on the walls, chosen by a decorator who understood investment value better than beauty. It was immaculate. It was expensive. It was utterly empty. Michael dropped his briefcase by the door, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, and stood at the window watching the city lights blur into abstract patterns. The cleaning woman's face kept appearing in his mind. Those eyes, that sad smile. I had a son once. He thought about his own mother, or rather, he thought about the absence of her. She had left when he was 7 years old, walked out of their small apartment in Queens with a single suitcase and a promise to send for him soon. Soon never came. His father never spoke of her again, built walls of silence so thick that by the time Michael was old enough to ask questions, he'd forgotten how to want answers. He'd been raised by his father alone, raised to be strong, to be sufficient, to need nothing and no one. And he had succeeded, hadn't he? Michael drained the scotch, set the glass down harder than necessary. The woman's voice echoed, "Some distances can't be crossed no matter how much you want to." He went to bed without eating, without calling anyone back, without doing any of the 100 things his schedule demanded. He lay in his king-sized bed in his silent apartment and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged him under. When he woke 5 hours later, he'd already forgotten her face. Or so he told himself. The next 3 weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Michael arrived at the office before dawn, left after dark, and moved through his days with mechanical precision. Meetings, acquisitions, strategies, numbers. The elevator incident faded into background noise, just another inconvenience in a life that had no room for inconveniences. But small things began to shift. He noticed the cleaning staff now, not consciously at first, just peripheral awareness as they moved through the building like ghosts, emptying trash bins, wiping down conference tables, existing in the spaces between important people, doing important things. One evening, working late again, Michael passed by the break room on the executive floor. Through the glass door, he saw a young cleaning woman, barely 20, sitting alone at a table. She was eating something from a plastic container, her shoulders hunched, exhaustion written in every line of her body. Her phone sat in front of her, screen dark. She wasn't scrolling, wasn't texting, just sitting, just existing. Michael paused, hand on his office door. The woman looked up, saw him watching, and immediately straightened, wiping her mouth and standing as though she'd been caught doing something wrong. He walked away quickly, unsettled by the guilt that flickered through him. It's just work. It's honest work. It's enough. Thursday afternoon, Michael's assistant, Sarah, knocked on his office door. She was efficient, capable, had been with him for 6 years, and knew better than to interrupt unless necessary. "Mr. Hartley?" "There's a situation in the south stairwell. Building management wanted you to know before it becomes a problem." Michael looked up from his laptop. What kind of situation? "One of the janitorial staff. She collapsed. The ambulance is on its way, but..." Sarah hesitated. "She's refusing to go to the hospital." Something about not being able to afford it. Something cold twisted in Michael's chest. Which floor? 15. He was already standing, already moving. Sarah hurried after him, surprised. "Sir, building management is handling..." "Oh..." "Which stairwell, Sarah?" "South, but..." He was already gone. Michael took the stairs down 2 at a time, his expensive shoes echoing in the concrete shaft. When he reached the 15th floor landing, a small crowd had gathered. 2 paramedics, a security guard, the building manager looking nervous and uncomfortable. And on the floor, sitting with her back against the wall, was a young woman in a janitorial uniform. Her name tag read Maria. She was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her stomach. "I'm fine," she kept saying. "I'm fine. I just need a minute. I can't afford the ambulance. Please, I have to get back to work." One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, knelt beside her. "Honey, you need to be checked out." "You passed out. That's not nothing." "I just haven't eaten today. That's all. I'm fine." "When did you last eat?" Maria looked away. "Yesterday morning." The silence that followed was heavy. Michael stepped forward. Everyone turned, surprised to see the CEO. "Take her to the hospital," he said quietly. "Bill everything to the company. Make sure she's seen by the best doctors, and make sure she understands that her job will be waiting for her when she's ready to come back." Maria looked up at him, eyes wide with shock and something close to fear. "Sir, I can't. That's too much." "It's not a debate." He turned to the building manager. "Make it happen, and find out why someone working in this building is missing meals." The manager paled. "Yes, sir, right away." Michael watched as the paramedics helped Maria onto a stretcher. She was still protesting weakly, still trying to refuse help she desperately needed. As they carried her past him, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. When the stairwell emptied, Michael stood alone in the flickering fluorescent light, staring at the spot where Maria had collapsed. "People like you. You accept everything. You settle. You don't fight." His own words from 3 weeks ago echoed back at him, bitter and cruel. What did he know about settling, about accepting, about pushing a cart while your stomach ate itself from hunger? He had judged that woman in the elevator, judged her for the simplicity of her existence, for the smallness of her struggles. But he was the small one. He was the one who had never looked beyond his own reflection. Michael returned to his office, but he couldn't focus. The spreadsheets blurred. The strategy reports felt meaningless. He kept seeing Maria's face, the shame and fear in her eyes when she thought she might lose her job for being human, for being hungry. At 7 o'clock that evening, instead of staying late as usual, Michael left the building. But he didn't go home. He walked. He walked through Manhattan as the sun set, past buildings he'd bought and sold, past restaurants where he'd closed deals over $1,000 bottles of wine, past people who existed in his world without him ever really seeing them. He walked until he found himself in Queens, in his old neighborhood. The building where he'd grown up still stood, smaller than he remembered, more worn. The bodega on the corner where his father used to buy coffee, the elementary school with its chain-link fence, the basketball court where he'd learned that being smart was worth more than being tough. Michael stood across the street from his childhood apartment building, hands in his pockets, and let the memories wash over him. His father coming home exhausted, smelling of construction sites and ambition. His father making him practice math problems at the kitchen table under a bare bulb. His father telling him again and again, "You're going to be more than this. You're going to be someone." And before that, hazier, softer, his mother, humming while she cooked, reading to him before bed, braiding her hair in the mirror while he sat on the bathroom counter, asking her endless questions about everything, and then the absence. The morning he woke up, and she was gone. His father's face, stone-hard with pain, the way their apartment became a tomb of silence. "I had a son once, but he's not mine anymore, not in any way that matters." Michael's breath caught. Number. It couldn't be. He shook his head, trying to dislodge the thought before it could take root. It was impossible. Absurd. His mother was gone, had been gone for 31 years. She could be anywhere. She could be dead for all he knew. She wasn't a cleaning woman in his building. She wasn't. But the thought wouldn't leave. Michael pulled out his phone, hesitated, then called Sarah. "I need you to pull personnel files for all janitorial staff, everyone, tomorrow morning." Sarah, to her credit, didn't question it. "All of them, sir?" "Yes, and Sarah, make it discreet." "Of course." He hung up and stood in the gathering darkness, staring at a life he'd left behind, wondering if the past ever really let you go or if it just waited, patient and quiet, for you to finally turn around. The next morning, Sarah placed a stack of files on Michael's desk. 43 employees, names, faces, backgrounds reduced to paper and ink. Michael went through them methodically. Too young, wrong ethnicity, wrong region. He told himself he was being thorough, practical, that he was simply following up on building management issues. He told himself he wasn't looking for her. But then he found it, near the bottom of the stack, a file thinner than the others. Name, Elena Dmitriev. Age 62. Position, evening janitorial staff, floors 15 through 25. employment. Start date 3 months ago. Previous employment, gap of 28 years. Before that, various service positions. Emergency contact, none listed. The photograph was standard issue, poor quality, but clear enough. Gray hair pulled back, lined face, eyes that held entire lifetimes. It was her, the woman from the elevator. Michael stared at the photo, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Elena Dmitriev. His mother's name had been Elena Hartley, before she married his father, before him, before everything. His hands trembled as he flipped through the sparse details. No social security number match. She must have changed it, or maybe started over under a different identity. No local address beyond a P.O. box. No references, no history, just gaps and silence. Gap of 28 years. Where had she been? What had she done? Why had she come back now to this building, to this city, to within touching distance of the son she'd abandoned? Michael stood abruptly, the chair scraping harsh against the floor. He grabbed his jacket and walked out without a word to Sarah, ignoring her surprised call of, "Mr. Hartley?" He took the elevator down, not the same one, but it didn't matter. They were all the same. All small boxes that trapped you with truth you didn't want to face. He found her on the 18th floor, cleaning the East Wing conference room. She had her back to the door, wiping down the long table in slow, careful strokes. Afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, catching dust motes in golden streams. Michael stood in the doorway, frozen. She hummed softly as she worked. Not a song, just a melody, something wordless and familiar that reached into his chest and squeezed. His mother used to hum like that. "Elena," he said. The humming stopped. She went very still, her hand pressed flat against the table. Slowly she turned around. When she saw him standing there, her face went pale. The cloth slipped from her fingers, landing soundlessly on the carpet. "Michael," she whispered. The sound of his name in her voice, a voice he'd forgotten but somehow still knew, broke something inside him. "Is it you?" he asked, his own voice barely audible. "Is it really you?" She nodded slowly, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "Yes." "How long?" His voice rose, sharp with anger now. "How long have you been here?" "How long have you been working in this building, cleaning my floors, riding my elevators?" 3 months. 3 months. Michael laughed, bitter and broken. 3 months, and you never said anything. You stood there in that elevator and listened to me talk about my father, about his company, about... His voice cracked. You let me talk about how he raised me alone, and you said nothing. "I didn't know how," she said softly. "I didn't know if you'd want to hear it. If you'd want to know." "Want to know?" Michael stepped into the room, his whole body shaking. "Want to know that my mother has been 10 floors away from me, pushing a cart, and couldn't find the words to say, 'I'm sorry for abandoning you when you were 7 years old.'" Elena flinched as though struck. "I know I don't deserve—" "You're right. You don't." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Waking up and you were just gone? Dad wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't explain. I thought—" His voice broke completely. "I thought it was my fault. I thought I did something wrong." "No!" Elena rushed forward, then stopped herself, as though remembering she'd forfeited the right to comfort him decades ago. "No, Michael. It was never your fault. Never." "Then why?" The question came out raw, scraped from the deepest part of him. "Why did you leave?" Elena's face crumpled. She sank into one of the conference chairs as though her legs could no longer hold her. "Because I was drowning," she whispered. "Because I was young and terrified and so desperately unhappy, and I didn't know how to be a mother, how to be a wife, how to be anything but lost." Michael stood over her, every muscle tight with rage and grief. "So you just left. You just walked away. I was going to come back." Tears streamed freely now. "I thought if I could just get away for a while, figure out who I was, I'd be better for you. stronger. I thought I'd come back in a few months and everything would make sense. But you didn't. No, her voice was barely a whisper, because a few months became a year. And a year became 5. And every day I told myself, tomorrow I'll call, tomorrow I'll go back, but the distance kept growing and growing until it felt impossible to cross. Until I convinced myself you were better off without me. Better off? Michael's voice rose to a shout. I spent my entire childhood wondering what I did wrong. My father worked himself to death trying to be enough for both of you. I built my entire life around never needing anyone because the one person who was supposed to stay left. The words echoed in the empty conference room. Elena looked up at him, her face aged beyond her years, marked by regret and roads traveled alone. You're right, she said simply. You're absolutely right. I destroyed you. I destroyed your father. I destroyed any chance at being your mother. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I came back to the city 2 years ago, saw your picture in a business magazine, read about everything you'd accomplished. I was so proud, Michael, so impossibly proud, and so ashamed. Then why come here? Why work in this building? She smiled, sad and broken. Because I wanted to be close to you, even if you never knew. I wanted to see the man you became. I wanted to, her voice caught. I wanted to feel like I was part of your world, even in the smallest, most invisible way. Michael turned away, unable to look at her. You should have stayed invisible. The cruelty of the words hung between them. I'll resign today, Elena said quietly, standing. I'll leave, and you'll never have to see me again. I'm sorry, Michael, for everything, for all of it. She moved toward the door, each step careful and measured, the walk of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning how to leave. Michael stood frozen, watching her go. She reached the doorway. Wait! The word came out before he could stop it. Elena paused but didn't turn around. Michael's throat felt like it was closing. I don't know what to do with this, with you. You don't have to do anything, she said softly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. Good, because I don't have anything to give you. I know. She walked out. Michael stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by leather chairs and polished wood, his reflection fractured in the glass windows, and for the first time since he was 7 years old, he let himself cry. Michael didn't go back to his office. He couldn't. Instead, he found himself in the parking garage, sitting in his car in the dim fluorescent light, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. His phone buzzed. Sarah, meeting with Tokyo office in 20 minutes. Shall I reschedule? He stared at the message. 20 minutes. The world kept spinning, kept demanding, kept pressing forward whether he was ready or not. He typed back, reschedule. Taking the rest of the day. Sarah's response was immediate. Are you all right? Michael didn't answer. He drove. Not home, not anywhere specific. Just through the city as afternoon faded into evening. He ended up at Battery Park, sitting on a bench facing the water, watching boats cut white lines through gray waves. His phone rang. Daniel, his CFO. Michael silenced it. It rang again. The head of acquisitions. Silenced. Again. The board chair. Silenced. Finally, he turned it off completely. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in shades of amber and dying light. People passed by, joggers, couples, families with children running ahead on unsteady legs, normal people living normal lives, carrying normal hurts that didn't crack the world in half. I wanted to be close to you, even if you never knew. Michael closed his eyes. 31 years. She'd been gone for 31 years, and in all that time, he'd built a fortress around the wound. He'd convinced himself he didn't need her, didn't even remember her, that she was just a story his father refused to tell. But that was a lie. He remembered everything. The way she'd sing him to sleep, the lavender smell of her hair, the sound of her laughter when he'd tell her about his day at school, making up wild stories just to hear that sound again and again. He remembered the last morning, how she'd kissed his forehead and told him to be good, how he'd asked if she'd be there when he got home from school, and she'd smiled and said, "Always." That was the last word she'd said to him. Always. A lie, the first of many he'd learned to expect from people who claimed to love you. Michael opened his eyes, staring at the darkening water. What was he supposed to do now? Forgive her? Impossible. Forget her again? He'd already tried that for 3 decades. His mind drifted to the elevator, to her words about honest work, about leaving places cleaner than you found them. She'd been cleaning his building, cleaning up after him, quite literally, without him ever knowing. The thought was almost unbearably sad. Michael stood, suddenly restless. He walked along the waterfront until his feet ached, until the park lights flickered on, until the city transformed into its nighttime self, all shadows and artificial light and anonymous faces. When he finally returned to his car, it was past 10. He sat in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, but he didn't start the engine. Instead, he pulled out his phone and turned it back on. 63 missed calls, 47 unread messages. He ignored all of them. There was only one call he needed to make. He pulled up building security's number. A man answered on the second ring. "Security?" "Davidson speaking." "This is Michael Hartley. I need you to tell me when Elena Dmitriev's shift ends tonight." A pause. "The cleaning staff?" "Let me check. She clocks out at 11, sir." Michael looked at his watch. 10:43. "Thank you." He drove back to the office faster than he should have, pulling into the parking garage with 12 minutes to spare. The building was nearly empty now, just security and the evening cleaning crew. Michael took the stairs instead of the elevator, climbing floor after floor until his legs burned and his breath came hard. He found her on the 23rd floor, the same floor where their elevator had stopped 3 weeks ago. She was emptying a trash bin in one of the junior executive offices, moving with the same quiet efficiency he'd seen before. Michael stood in the doorway, watching. She sensed him before she saw him, that instinct mothers have, even broken ones. She turned slowly. "Michael." "I'm not ready to forgive you," he said without preamble. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "What you did, leaving like that, it broke something in me that never healed right." Elena nodded, tears already forming. "I know. But," he paused, the word catching, "but I think I need to understand. Not why you left. I heard that already. I need to understand where you went, what happened to you, how Elena Hartley became Elena Dmitriev and ended up pushing a cleaning cart in her son's building." She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "That's a very long story." "I have time." They stood there in the fluorescent light, mother and son, strangers wearing familiar faces. Finally, Elena gestured to the empty office. "Do you want to sit?" They sat across from each other at a small desk, the cleaning cart parked in the hallway like a silent witness. "When I left," Elena began, her voice quiet but steady, "I didn't know where I was going. I just got on a bus headed west. I ended up in Chicago first, then Milwaukee, then smaller towns I couldn't even find on a map now." She stared at her rough, reddened hands as she spoke. "I worked whatever jobs I could find. Waitress, hotel maid, factory worker. I kept thinking I'd wake up one morning and suddenly know how to go back, how to face you and your father and explain why I'd been so weak." "You called yourself weak," Michael said. "But leaving takes a different kind of strength." "No," Elena shook her head firmly. "Leaving was the weakness. Staying gone was the cowardice." She continued, words flowing now like water from a broken dam. "I got married again. His name was Dmitri, and he was kind at first. We moved to Michigan. I thought maybe I could build a new life, become someone who deserved to be someone's mother. What happened? He wasn't as kind as I thought, and I wasn't as strong. That marriage lasted 7 years before I left that too." She smiled bitterly. I'm very good at leaving." Michael said nothing. "I moved around for years after that. Portland, Seattle, back to Chicago. I worked, I survived. I tried not to think about the little boy I'd left in Queens. But of course, I thought about you every single day. Wondered what you looked like, how you sounded, if you were happy." "I wasn't," Michael said flatly. Elena's face crumpled. "I know, I'm so sorry." "Keep going." She took a shaky breath. 2 years ago, my sister died. Your Aunt Ruth. She was the last family I had left, the only person who knew where I was. When she died, I realized I had nothing. No family, no home, no purpose. Just years and years of running. So you came back. "I came back," she confirmed, "to the city where I'd left everything. I thought maybe I could just see you from a distance, make sure you were okay, and that would be enough. I didn't plan to work in your building. That was—" She laughed softly. "That was fate being either very cruel or very kind. You could have told me that night in the elevator. You could have said something. I know, but I looked at you, this powerful, successful man, and I thought, what right do I have? What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound like I was asking for something?" "What would you have been asking for?" Elena met his eyes, and in them he saw everything she'd never said: forgiveness, understanding, a second chance at a role she'd abandoned. "Nothing you could give," she said finally. "Nothing anyone could give. Just the impossible, a way to undo the past." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Michael spoke. "I don't know what this is. Us sitting here. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel or do or say." "You don't have to know. Everyone always expects me to know. That's my job. CEO, chief executive, everything. I'm supposed to have answers." "Then maybe," Elena said gently, "just for tonight. You don't have to be the CEO. You can just be Michael." His name in her voice again, that voice he'd forgotten he remembered. "I don't know how to be just Michael." "Neither do I," she admitted. "I don't know how to be your mother. I gave up that right a long time ago." Michael looked at her, really looked. At the lines on her face, the gray in her hair, the way her hands couldn't stay still. This woman was a stranger. But she was also the first person who'd ever loved him, and maybe, despite everything, still did. "I'm not promising anything," he said finally. "I'm not saying we can fix this or that I can forget what happened. I'm not asking you to, but maybe—" He stopped, the words harder than any negotiation he'd ever faced. "Maybe we could try. Not to be mother and son, I don't think we can be that, but maybe we could try to be something." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I would like that more than anything." Michael stood, suddenly exhausted. "I have to go." "Of course." He walked to the door, then paused. "Elena?" "Yes?" "Do you still hum when you work?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes, old habit." "I remember that. You used to hum all the time. In the kitchen, doing laundry, everywhere." A sob escaped her. "You remember." "I remember everything," Michael said quietly. "That's the problem." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. But for the first time in 31 years, the weight of those memories felt a little less crushing. And in the empty office, Elena Dmitriev sat alone with her cleaning cart and wept, not from grief, but from something fragile and terrifying that felt almost like hope. Thank you for sharing this moment of chance, connection, and meaning. If this story reminded you that fate often hides in everyday moments, then please subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you heartfelt tales of serendipity, where a simple twist of life can change everything. Until next time, stay open, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the people we've lost are closer than we think, waiting for us to finally see them. Subscribe now.